All right, good morning. Ready? All right, I'm bringing up the slides. Bear with me. Sorry for tiny delay here. I'm going to call to order the March 19th, 2026 meeting of the Connecticut Data Analysis Technology Advisory Board. Thank you to Peter and the GA staff for getting this started. We're going to start. We have an agenda where we have sort of two purposes for today's meeting. We're giving updates on some of the items in the state data plan and would welcome members of the board to advise on any of the topics there to make sure we're sort of on the right track as we're a little past the midway point in the two-year plan. And then in the sort of last portion of the meeting, we're going to discuss some of the terminology that's used to talk about data, public records, to try and identify where there's areas where we need to sort of build further knowledge about those, because we've had a couple cases where something comes up and then people are using the same terms in different ways, and we thought there's a good opportunity for the board to discuss some of that. I'm going to go through, just sort of call the members, and if you can announce yourself that you're here and present today. And then we have two transitions on the board, which we'll go through after we do the roll call. So we have appointed through Speaker of the House, Thad Dymkowski and Seth Klaskin.
Present.
Present.
Okay. Appointed through the Speaker of the Senate. Wait, Senate. Oh my God. To Senator Looney. Michelle Reardon, Knowlton, Adler Coffey.
Present.
Adler on the meeting. I don't hear. Okay. Pointed through the House Minority Leader. Bree Barner.
I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we still have the one open seat through the House Minority Leader and two open seats through the Senate Minority Leader. The two transitions on the, I will go through the ex officio members in a second. We'll go through the two transitions on the board. So we have David Labadia, who I believe is not here, but I don't know if Jeff Corvo through Department of Administrative Services.
Yep, present.
That's Jeff. Okay. And then through the Freedom of Information Commission, Colleen Murphy, as I think many people have seen, is retired. But I believe Nick Smara is here as the designee.
Yes, I am. Hello.
Thank you. Hello. Through the Attorney General's office, John Newman.
Here.
Thank you. Through the Chief Court Administrator, Joe Grealish, who I think is out this week. I don't know. Okay, no Joe. State Librarian, Deborah Schonder.
Good morning, everybody. Present.
Morning. Through the State Treasurer, Christopher Regan.
Good morning.
Morning. Through the Secretary of the State, Deputy Secretary Barahona. Are you here? Okay. Through the State Comptroller's Office, Michelle Parlos.
Yep, here. Good morning.
Michelle. Our Geographic Information Officer to my left, Alfredo Herrera.
Here.
Great. And I'm Scott Gall. I'm the Chief Data Officer and Chair of the Board. The two transitions go in different order. So Colleen Murphy, again, has been the head of FOIC for quite some time and the representative from FOIC on the board. I'm very glad that FOIC has been active and consistent participants in the board. It's really important to make sure that we're working with the way in which the state collects and manages and uses data is done in compliance with all the requirements under our freedom of information laws, that our ability to meet the public's right to know is never in conflict with the way in which the state uses data. She is retired, stepping off the board, and so Nick has been in several meetings, and we just had present to a bunch of folks at Open Data Day last week or 2 weeks ago. So we're grateful to him for joining. And I believe, Nick, I don't know if you want to confirm, you're the sort of going forward designee, but Colleen is not here. We're very grateful to the time she's put into the board historically, and Nick, your willingness to serve in this role going forward.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm just kind of, I not quite sure what was the second part of that, but yeah, essentially I'll just be filling in on the board while for this part, but not sure that helped in any way. But yes, just confirming exactly what you said.
Making sure people know who you are. That's important. And then the other transition, Seth Klaskin is moving off the board due to new responsibilities that I think he can describe. Seth, I believe, was in either the original or very close to the original group of members of this board. I was on it early on in one of the sort of voting member appointed roles. Michelle, I know, was around in the early days as well. So Seth has been on the board for close to a decade now. I don't know if we have the records kind of going back, but throughout that has been like an active and consistent presence, engaged, like willing to put the time in to go through or discuss any of the different topics that come up here. And so I've been very appreciative of the time and effort that he's put into this. It will be a loss, but he's going on to new and exciting opportunities. And I just wanted to express gratitude for the time that Seth's put into this. The voting members of the board are all doing this at a voluntary basis. I'm here because this is my job, as is the case for, I think, the ex officio members, but they really put in time above and beyond, and Seth for a particularly long period of time. And so I just wanted to express the gratitude for his service here. And Seth, I don't know if you want to tell folks what's new, what's coming for you, but
Yeah, Scott, thank you very much. Thank you to all my fellow board members. I've really appreciated being a part of this board for about a decade. I think we've done amazing work. Scott, I think you've really organized and upped our game since you've been at the helm. I was recently elected to serve as a probate judge for my district. And because of separation of powers, I'll no longer be able to serve on a legislative commission. So it's been wonderful serving with you all. Thank you very much. And I wish you good luck and Godspeed as you continue this great mission.
And Scott, if you don't mind, I'd just like to say a few words to Seth. We're going to miss you dearly. You and I have been at this for a long time, and I appreciate your constant and persistent pursuit of open and transparent government. And I think, yeah, it's a loss for the state, but not a loss for the judicial branch. So we'll miss having you on the board, as always participating and vocal advocate for open and transparent data. So appreciate your tenure.
Thank you, Michelle.
Scott, if I may.
yeah, Thad, thank you.
So I want to express my appreciation as well for the time I've had the privilege of working alongside Seth on the Connecticut Data Analysis Tech Advisory Board. From some of the earliest days of the board's inception, he and I have shared many spirited conversations and discussions that kind of pushed thinking, challenged assumptions, and ultimately helped advance technology policy within the state. Your expertise, your insight, your thoughtful, enlightened viewpoints have always been invaluable to the board's work. You will definitely be missed both for your depth of knowledge that you brought to every conversation and for the perspective that you offered generously. So I personally want to wish you all the best in your new endeavors. I want to extend my heartfelt congratulations on your well-deserved appointment to the judgeship. And as was said, the state is very fortunate to have your judgment and dedication continuing to serve the public in this new capacity. So from myself, you and I started very early on in this board, and I just want to say congratulations and all the best to you, my friend.
Thank you, Thad. And thank you, Scott, for your words as well.
Well, thank you, Seth. Again, your service here is appreciated. I forgot that also was in the early days. I'm getting into the Zoom meeting so I can see everybody as well. But there's a group of people that have put a lot of time into this, and you're one of them. And again, just want to express gratitude for that. That also, as a reminder, we will then have an open seat before the June meeting is the next meeting that's calendared. And so that leaves one of the appointed seats vacant. As always, looking for ways to fill that. This is through Representative Ritter's office. But if there's folks that you think would be interested in serving on the board in the future, please do not hesitate to reach out either to me or to Speaker's office directly, or to Seth. All right, Peter, can we pull the slides up? We're going to begin with our agenda. We have a quick just reminder on the goals that are in the state data plan, and then we're going to go through some areas where there's updates on those goals. And we have a couple folks that will talk to us first about job classifications. So you can click the next and keep going. That's the agenda. Next. Keep going. Okay, so these just as a refresher for folks, obviously, this is a lot of the focus of the board is helping to develop and then implement the state data plan. So again, we're a little past the halfway mark in the 2-year cycle for this plan. So later this year, we'll begin developing and then reviewing and going through the process with this board to finalize the next state data plan for 27-28. But these are the first 3 of the goals that we have in the state data plan, looking at making data easier to find, more accessible, building capacity for agency staff on this. And then go to the next slide, focusing on the talent in state job classes, making sure we've got the agency capacity to sort of meet the needs that are frequently and constantly being asked of state agencies. And then we're looking at ways in which we can improve the ability of agencies to share data ethically, safely, and securely, and that we can improve our policies to ensure that we have data that's AI ready. So those are our 6 goals in the plan, and we'll in different ways sort of touch on aspects of each of those in the first portion of today's meeting. And the first one we're going to go into is talking about what's goal 4 here, which if you click to the next slide is a little more detail on. I'll go quick. Let me go briefly through the privacy changes. Sorry, I forgot about this. And then we'll go to the job classes. So in the last meeting, we talked about changes to data privacy that were in the Public Act from last year's special session, and got good feedback from members of the board, and then did further circulation with agency staff to understand, make sure that they had an opportunity to weigh in and provide feedback. And that the guidance document from that, which will be issued through the Attorney General's office, is, I believe, very close to being finalized. I don't think it's actually final yet, but your feedback was very helpful in developing that, and that'll get finalized soon and then distributed and promulgated. John, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add on that, but again, that's for me is an important sort of role for the board, is to make sure that we've got an opportunity for people with expertise in these areas to kind of weigh in and get a broader set of perspectives before we write up and finalize something.
Yeah, the guidance itself is set and approved before distributing. We have, since the AG actually has 3 different roles in it, which is guidance, determination of indemnification, and prosecution. Those roles need to be separated. So we have to set up an internal process and designate people. But the document itself is set.
Right, thank you. All right. Next.
Right. I'm sorry. Can we go back to that last slide?
Yeah.
The 3rd bullet. When it refers to date, time, or place of a hearing, proceeding, or appointment with a public agency, can I assume that that just means like if there's a hearing related to that state employee or official, or is, because it seems to me that if we're no longer posting dates, times, and places of hearings and proceedings generally, that's a major meetings violation of FOIA. Meetings notice.
Yeah, I'm going to defer a little to John, but I believe also Joe Grealish is our representative from Judicial Branch. I believe he had brought up a similar point in a prior meeting, that the intention was not to take public meetings off. And I think this is the wording that's on the slides is like a condensed version of what's in the legislation, but the actual, the intent is what you're saying. It's hearings for those appointments for that individual person. It's not erasing court dates and public hearings from state websites.
Yeah, in terms of PA 25-3, you have to remember the overarching principle is public records trump. So anything that is a public record is postable. The challenge, of course, is not all things for all agencies may or may not be public. So that's really where the challenge is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like I would assume, for example, if there were a disciplinary hearing for an official, that would not necessarily be posted because that, might be a private event within the agency to counsel or to hear a matter regarding discipline for that individual, right?
Correct. Actually, I can say yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a
Well,
too large a hole we're creating in FOIA there.
Well, yeah, if I could just jump in, I mean, when we're talking about discipline and employee, forget the exact language, but there are the executive session provisions, and then within that executive session provision, there's something that can require if an employee says, no, I want this to be done in public session, and so I'm not quite sure with that example with we're talking about disciplinary proceedings that would still be within the, I think there's still probably a FOIA issue there because, one, if they do request it to be in public, there's that, but two, you still have the requirement that the agenda for any executive session that be reasonably described to apprise the public of what's going to be talked about during the executive session. So, I know we're dealing with summary language here, but I just, just a few concerns just from that language. I think I just wanted to point out. So maybe if it comes up again and if it's relevant, dig into exactly what we're talking about. But I do see some significant concerns with what was just discussed. This was Nick from the FOIC.
Yes, thanks.
I think the whole purpose of requesting a public hearing under those circumstances, like if I'm a state employee who's subject to discipline and there's an executive session, I can request a public hearing. Instead, it would seem to me that does not, that PA 25-3 does not change that because it prohibits the agency from disclosing, but if the employee themselves kind of overrides that and allows their name and the time of the hearing to be announced and have the whole hearing publicized, I would imagine that trumps the mandatory provision of the statute.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. I'm talking specifically about the notice provision that's for all agendas and for all executive sessions. So even if you go into executive session, you can't just put executive session personnel matter. It has to be more specific than that. And there's body of case law on that. And so to the extent that that's even assuming you're still just going into the executive session, it has to be something that's described. So again, without kind of having the actual language in front of me, I would just point that out.
And I'm also a Board of Ed member, longtime Board of Ed member, so I have a lot of experience with executive session law. And my understanding is you don't have to put the employee's name, though. You can say on the agenda that there's an executive session to address a disciplinary matter, personnel matter, or something like that, and then you make that part of the motion going from the meeting into the executive session, right?
Yeah, it's really fact specific, and it's what reasonably apprises the public as to what's going to be discussed. So if and there's a whole body of commission precedent and case law on it, but saying something just like executive session personnel matter probably wouldn't cut it. It would have to be a little bit more specific about even just the title of the position. I think might get you over the line for being okay, but it's really fact specific. So but something like what we're talking about here, I think does directly implicate the notice requirements.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to resolve this issue here. I just think it's important that we raised it, kind of, put an earmark on it, so maybe the AG's office can grapple with that further as the bill moves through the legislature.
It's actually passed as law, and guidance is drafted.
Oh, 25. I'm sorry, 25-3.
Yeah, it's already passed, and there's an overarching notwithstanding that the FOI applies. So everything that Nick is talking about is applicable. Now, if there were a proceeding that were otherwise confidential, or the employee were to not be identified as exists under existing law, but employee then themselves identifies themselves or puts some kind of marking in there, there's a provision for waiver. There's a specific rule for waiver, but I think if the employee publishes it, I think that would be a deemed waiver.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. This is further testament. You'll be missed. To keep us moving on to the next topic, I think this also highlights two things. One, this is, again, you're seeing sort of PowerPoint version of the language. What the AG's office has developed is a little more detailed, or much more detailed. This slide has the list of exemptions, of which there's several, to allow for sort of the kinds of things folks are talking about to continue to proceed. The other thing I think it speaks to is the challenges we'll have on disseminating this and making sure it's sort of interpreted clearly and with fidelity as it goes through the many different places like boards of ed that would be required to abide by this. So I think that's a forthcoming challenge. Challenge one is getting, sort of the guidance through, and this board, again, through this conversation and the prior one in December, to me, it's been very helpful to get folks to weigh in and try and identify where something's not clear or further clarification is provided, which is exactly why we have the provision that guidance should be provided to provide some of that clarification that's not there in the initial legislative language. All right, Peter, we can go to the next section. I'm going to skip this one on data request processes, reviewing job classes. So this is one of the goals. The next one, yeah. One of the goals in the state plan is to, it says modernize here, job specifications for data and analytics roles. This covers data analytics, research, evaluation, GIS roles. There's many different types of ways that people use data in state employment. And we're going to make sure we can attract and retain people into those roles. So what we had put in the state data plan is to be able to review those job classes, get a sense of the challenges that agencies have attracting and retaining people in those roles. And so folks know kind of what we've done so far is work with a group of state agency staff to identify challenges that they experience attracting and retaining folks into those kinds of roles, engage both state HR, which is under Department of Administrative Services, and then the Office of Labor Relations, that's under Office of Policy and Management, OPM, our agency, to make sure that they're engaged in the process to look at changes we can make to the way the state hires into these roles. And then, and we'll bring in a couple of guests momentarily, we have folks with expertise in public sector hiring and talent from U.S. Digital Response, and they're going to help draft some recommendations to the job classes, make sure that we can align with the approach that the state has for human resources and labor relations. And so they just started a couple of weeks ago, and I see Keith and I think Daniela are on the call today. But we wanted to have them here briefly to just introduce themselves, explain a little bit about what Digital Response does so that folks kind of know what that is. But it's a good way that we can sort of expand capacity, get help at a state level from people that have a depth of expertise in this topic that can help us put pen to paper on some things that were otherwise going to be a little challenge to do in the next few months. Then if the members of the board have anything that you want to bring up about challenges attracting and retaining folks into these roles from the sort of role that the board has, if there's feedback now, we can take that. And I think if there's an interest in digging a little deeper, we can set up a follow-up conversation, folks. But I saw Keith and Danielle, I think, and I might be missing somebody, but whether Keith or Danielle, did you want to do a quick introduction for yourselves and what Digital Response is and just the broad arc of your engagement? And then if board members have any suggestions for them as they begin this work, then now's a good time to do that. It's not the only time. Again, if you want to set up a follow-up conversation, we can do that.
Thank you for the intro, Scott. I have a couple of quick slides just to help for visualizing it for the group here. Is that okay if I screen share momentarily?
Yeah, I think Peter needs to give you the screen sharing access, but we'll do that.
In the meantime, I'll give a little bit of background on USDR in general. U.S. Digital Response, we just had our sixth anniversary. The foundation of our work is really in helping government organizations build their digital capacity. Most of the work that we do is pro bono and covers a range of topic areas, including generative AI, language access, procurement, user research, and then my area of focus, which is in sort of the talent operations and hiring space. This particular project, as Scott mentioned, is focused on job classification. So let me see if I can do the share here. I think we should be able to. Hopefully you all can see that. Can someone just provide a confirmation of that?
Full
Yes, we
visual.
can. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So just a quick overview of the team here. As Scott mentioned, we have Daniela here as well, so we'll give her a chance just to introduce herself. But the team is comprised of me. I'm a permanent USCR staff, previously head of people operations with the Technology Transformation Service, which is in GIS in the federal government. And then we have Tanya, Andrea, David, and Daniela, who are all expert volunteers that we bring in through our U.S. Digital Response Network. Tanya being our project manager, Andrea having just really extensive background out in the data science space. David, who has worked hand in hand for many years with governments on HR and job classification specifically, building those out. And then Daniela, I'll open it up to her for a second if she'd like to say hello to the group and talk about her background.
Thank you, Keith, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. My expertise has been in government organizations working with land classification and environmental impact. I'm contributing in this job classification project for USDR and the state of Connecticut. And thank you for having us.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks so much, Daniela. And then just for the Connecticut team, we're primarily working with Scott and Vanessa. I just see I had a typo on her name, but Vanessa. Just real quick, we're working on this. We're going to be partnering with them for over about a 4 to 6 month period, working hand in hand. Our goal in this is to really just help bring, as Scott mentioned, sort of perspective on how other governments are doing this work. Even factors out in the private sector, just how job classifications and job roles are being viewed and sort of built out in different sectors, just to be able to bring that perspective and guidance and support to the process in hand. Deliverables we're going to be doing an assessment of the materials in hand, helping to provide some guidance on career ladders in there. If there's any sort of review of existing materials and providing feedback and things like that, we'll be there. And also just kind of, one of the things that they're considering is certifications, accreditations in the hiring processes, kind of assessing what is fair for particular roles, what feels like it's relevant, just to make sure that we're supporting y'all in the best way possible there. Just for the extra perspective there, things that are outside of the scope there. I know that there's oftentimes union considerations and things with this. We're really sensitive to that. We're really sensitive to PII. And so, all of our recommendations are purely meant to support the experts that are in place there and not interfere with any of those processes. And obviously let the unions do their work and review on any recommendations that we make there. Just kind of closing out timeline, again, as I mentioned, we'll be doing this work over the next few months, probably through mid-year. We have it sort of broken down into different phases here. I won't go in there specifically, but because of the particular, usually our engagements are in about the 2 to 3 month range, but because this is a significant effort that's going to be going on so long, we wanted to be able to be there and support as much as we possibly could. So certainly if anybody here has questions or suggestions or recommendations, we have ample time to be able to implement that into our work. And then as Scott said, if there's any considerations around hiring or any of the other focus areas that USTR works on, I'm happy to talk with anybody in the Connecticut government about those as well.
Thank you, Keith. I wanted to again engage and see if board members had any questions for the digital response team or just sort of general reactions to this. But to make 2 points again, we wanted to make sure there's an opportunity to highlight the work that they're doing with the board, so you know that we're making progress on the items that are in the state data plan, and then to also just kind of help set expectations. Despite the substantial talent that this team is bringing to the table at the end of the 4 to 6 month engagement, it is probably not the case that these things are actually going to change. It will be just recommendations for ways in which we can make change due to the challenging nature of hiring in the public sector. It will be perhaps quite some time before some of these things change, but this is hopefully putting us on the course where we've got a very solid set of recommendations on how to do that, and a path where we can see change occurring. But even several months is it's not a time frame through which we can make changes in the way in which I think would be needed for some of these jobs. So I see Thad's hand up. I've spoken long enough to generate some comments. Great, Thad.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, so those of us who work in technology and specifically in GIS, and I'm sure Daniela can attest to this as well, that specifically in GIS, we've become more of a data scientist or an information scientist. So I think examining the job descriptions of, and titles specifically of folks, we all know that at least at the state level, titles are associated with salary classifications and those kinds of things. And I can tell you from speaking with colleagues within the state umbrella from various organizations within the state, we've all kind of felt this for quite some time, knowing that there are folks who are doing data science work who are classified as planners or who are classified as engineers or all these things, of which I think the skill set for such titles as those are a little bit different, classifications, qualifications. So I think this is long overdue. So it's good to see the state taking this proactive step to try and rectify some of these challenges that we've been dealing with. And I think it's a great step. I do hope that in the end that these recommendations are taken by the state and examined and looked at for implementation. I know that as a whole, the state moves at a glacial pace, so I don't expect these things to happen instantaneously. But I'd like to see that the forward motion that we're putting forward here is kind of carried by the state. So I applaud the state, and I'm glad to see USDR involved in this, and hope that this board, this advisory board, can serve in any way, shape, or form. I look forward to seeing that. So thank you.
Thad. Any other comments from board members before we proceed with the rest of our agenda? And again, I think that to your comments will be the digital response team will be engaging with subject matter experts on some of the different roles in the state, and being able to do that with the board is helpful here. And we'll probably have a follow-up call for you too, as well.
I would just agree with what Thad said, and thank you, Keith, and your team for helping the state with that.
We're happy to. You're very welcome.
Yes, they're volunteers. So really, as Seth is, and so thank you again to the many people who have volunteered time to get some of these things through. So, Peter, if we pull the slides back up, we will continue. Next goal. You hit the next, sorry. Great. So the next goal in the state data plan is to have an enterprise approach to data sharing. And so we're going to do two sort of linked, no pun intended, I guess, updates here. So we want to make sure that state agencies can share data safely, ethically, and securely within the sort of many different guardrails that they're held to. And so that is, again, striking the balance between what we talked about at the beginning of the meeting, between privacy and protecting people's personal information, their data, and the ability to use that data to inform policy and practice in different ways by supporting analysis, research, evaluation, those different topics. And so we're going to talk in a second. I see Seth has a hand up. Talk in a minute. Katie Breslin from our team at OPM is going to talk through the secure data enclave and developments on the sort of technical side, so to make sure we have the infrastructure to do that. And Rachel Leventhal-Weiner will, after that, go through a sort of recent report and some of the other things, so you can see that this data is actually being used to inform policy and practice. And so that's something I think the board's expressed interest in, is making sure that we're not just talking about the technical parts, but you're actually seeing how the data is getting pulled together, how you can access it and use it. And so we'll go through that momentarily. But I see Seth, you have a hand up.
Yeah, I think I'm going to reserve my comment or question until after their presentation, but I do want to reserve time for that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, well, Katie will yield the floor for a probably brief update on the development.
Brief update.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Katie Breslin. I'm the data governance coordinator, and I work primarily on DataLink CT, which is our longitudinal data system that links data across multiple agencies to answer policy questions. We began this project to build a secure data enclave just over a year ago, and really to for risk management, strengthening security and control and oversight of how agency data is being used and accessed within a protected environment. Yes. This minimizes manual data transfers by only moving data to one closed environment that meets the security and privacy and confidentiality parameters that are necessary for our agencies to participate, ensures secure matching in another closed environment within the enclave, and provides centralized hosting for agency data requests. So like I said, we've been doing this for just over a year. If you could go to the next slide. We have made some pretty considerable progress, and we're still, I guess edits didn't make it. We have accomplished a lot in the last year, and we have a lot still to go. So we have successfully onboarded data stewards at each of our agencies so that they are prepared and can upload data when there is an approved data request with a signed data sharing agreement. We have ongoing implementation of security logging and monitoring through the assistance and support with our partner agency, DEMIS. We have successfully moved the software to match data into this environment, and we have user guides and assistance and support ready for all of our agencies. So really right now, we know that it's a secure environment and can hold data securely, it can't leave. And so right now we're working on the project analytic environment and making sure that those tools that are necessary to conduct analysis are available. So if you could go to the next slide. You can see sort of another display of what we've been working on. So we have authorized data users. We know that we can export approved data that is in the aggregate form. We have, like I said, security logging, and we're working on those analytic tools that are necessary to do analysis. So SAS, R, and Excel, and then other software that comes up. And then if you go to the next slide, there's a short timeline of since last December. So we've accomplished quite a lot in the last few months, and we are looking forward to making the enclave functional and available for approved data requests in the spring. And that is my brief update.
I'm going to pause and see if Seth or anyone else wanted to add anything at this point, and then otherwise the next section of the presentation, Rachel Leventhal-Weiner will go through, if she is here, just waiting to pull her in, go through
I'm here.
Great. recent reporting using the data that we have through DataLink CT. No comments or hands yet. Okay, so we'll continue. Rachel, floor is yours. Peter, you can go to the next slide.
Great. I'm going to actually present on two reports that we've recently published, and I'm going to breeze through just this. We just heard a little bit about DataLink CT. We link data to answer policy questions. And if you're not familiar with DataLink CT, we were formerly P20 Win. So we did some rebranding last year to sort of more accurately characterize what we do as a group. There are 15 member agencies, as Katie said, and we process data requests to link data across agencies to co-create, design, support, evaluation of government policies and programs. And on the next slide, I'm going to be presenting today some data that comes from two different projects. One that we just actually published last month. The first is on the education and workforce pathways. And the second, which we don't have slides prepared for, so I'm going to provide a super high level update, is the Disconnected and At-Risk Youth Report. The Education and Workforce Pathways Report came to us as a request initiated by the Office of Workforce Strategy in partnership with the Department of Labor. And the questions, which appear on the slide in a second, are about sort of what's happening with our education and workforce systems and training. And so an integrated workforce system, in theory, needs integrated data. This is a visual that comes from the Data Quality Campaign's work around education and workforce pathways. I've highlighted on this visual, though, where the data lives. So if you're interested in following someone's pathway through their early education, K-12 education, into their post-secondary lives and even post-secondary lives, you can see the data about the people that we collect as a state live in lots of different places, from the Office of Early Childhood, State Department of Education, Department of Labor, Office of Workforce Strategy, Higher Eds, out into the workforce system, again with the Department of Labor. So integrated data is really necessary to help our agencies understand the impact of their work. So on the next slide, we offer, just the sort of guiding question for this project, or what are some of the outcomes for our workforce system? And if we keep moving to the next one, here are some high-level findings that help us just establish some foundational knowledge. So we combine data sources from several different agencies, which I think are listed on the next slide. We presented these findings. We wanted to kind of give the main event up front. So here are the questions that we approached. What are the wage and employment outcomes of our workforce training programs? The same for our post-secondary adult ed and technical education programs. What are some of the common pathways between and within education and workforce training? What are some of the outcomes by career pathway? And then how, is there a way of thinking about where's the strongest wage growth? And on the next slide, I'll show you a little bit about the sources of this data come from the Department of Labor, State Department of Education, National Student Clearinghouse. Some of those data live at the State Department of Ed, and some actually came from the National Student Clearinghouse itself, and our technical education and career system. And we collected data. We requested data over a long time frame. We did not have data for every program for every year. So some of the findings that you'll see are for the entire study period, but that doesn't include every program for every year. And on the next slide, we just provide a little overview of what we're talking about when we say workforce training, as well as post-secondary adult and career technical education. So this isn't necessarily an exhaustive list of every possible program that the state offers, but these are some of the flagship federally funded, state-funded programs, and really a paper like this, an analysis like this, hasn't been attempted recently, or it's done in kind of pockets. State Department of Ed does it for some of their work. Some of the post-secondary eds do it for their work. But just trying to put everything together to understand also how things are connected is something that we considered innovative, and that the Office of Workforce Strategy was interested in understanding. When we talk about wage and employment outcomes, we're talking about whether folks are employed, which is measured by whether or not they have wages in our unemployment system, what median wages are for a particular group of folks, and then what sector they were employed in. And when we looked at pathways, we kind of lined up people's education, workforce training, and wage records to understand what are their journeys. So what do they start at one point, go to another program? What's the duration of those journeys? You can imagine with this many programs, there's going to be a lot of variation. So I had some of the high level findings, but we walk through them in a little more detail on the next slide. So just a couple of things before we just talk about the findings. This is one of the first times that we've put together these data on our team. So measurement and data quality were things that, as data professionals, always are a challenge when you're trying to bring together data from different sources measured in different ways. So we know pretty well that demographic data are not standardized across all of our agencies, which just means that we can't always say that different racial or ethnic groups are measured in different ways based on the agency. They're also reported up to the federal government in different ways. Measurement really mattered a lot here. So what counts as starting or ending? Did you earn a credential? Is a credential even possible to earn? All of those kinds of questions are things that we really worked through in this analysis, and we think will be even clearer in the next version of the report, as this was the first analysis that we attempted. Let me just list a number of factors that could impact someone's actual career pathway. So we're looking at a window of 11 years of time, but that could vary based on which 11 years we looked at, depending on your own lifespan at the time we were doing the study. So there's lots of ways that other factors impact whether people continue on, finish, start different programs. And we flagged these in great detail under limitations in the report. So we had three kind of big findings we like to highlight. The first is on the next slide, I believe. So over the study period, agencies recorded over 700,000 program starts. That means that about 70,000 a year or so started a workforce or education program. And while we have data from both Department of Labor and our higher eds and State Department of Education, but more, 20% of those program starts were in workforce programs run by Department of Labor, and 80% were on the post-secondary career technical side of things. So there was, I think, folks who were participating in the study came in with some kind of prevailing thoughts about who starts where and when. And so, we do have a lot of folks who are doing, and the post-secondary career technical and adult ed can range from pursuing your GED, pursuing English as a second language training, as well as starting a 2-year, 4-year credential. On the next slide, the pathways really varied on both program purpose and duration. So there was a prevailing curiosity around whether or not folks had more than a one-step pathway. And that means they did one program and that was all we could see in the wage records, all we could see in the program records. And so 2/3 of the participants that we looked at in the study data completed a one-step pathway, which means 1/3 did, more than one thing. And the prevailing ones are listed here. It could be, starting 4-year college, perhaps not completing and restarting again, starting 4-year college and going back for another kind of credential, or the opposite direction. In many cases, folks were doing more than one adult education program. There are over 1,000 ways that these 2-step pathways can be measured. And some folks attempted even 3, 4, and 5-step pathways. So getting into what pathways look like and which outcomes and wage growth looks better for which pathway is still open question for us. We're going to be working with the participating agencies to refine this question in the next version of the report. And then in terms of wage growth, and sort of if we think about wage growth and outcomes, all programs experience some wage growth within 8 quarters. So the way that wage growth is typically measured, especially by the Department of Labor and federal reporting, is to look at wages 2 quarters after program completion. We wanted to extend that time frame out a little bit. So 8 quarters is up to 2 years for those with wage data. And you can see the trends that are listed here in the spark lines that we've included here show wage growth going in a positive direction for most programs attempted. But these programs, as I said, all represent really different both purposes and durations. So the Wagner-Pizer program is a job recovery and upskilling program that could last from 30 to 90 days. And then a 4-year BA is, 4 years or longer. So there's a lot of different ways. These programs serve different populations. Registered apprenticeships serve people who are different than the folks in Best Chance who were formerly incarcerated. So there's a lot of opportunity. I think on the next slide, we have the ways that we're looking to innovate in the next report. So we have some new data sources that we can add that will add some additional program detail for some of the workforce programs that are coming from the workforce development boards. We also will have some detail from post-secondary sources around some of those 2-year programs. So we think that the new data sources will enhance the way we can look at those detailed program pathways. And in addition, we want to look at some enhanced analysis on earned credentials specifically, so not just programs where we start and end, but where a credential may be earned, as well as the common pathways that we see, so the most commonly attempted pathways. We think that there's also some programs that serve a pretty small population or have a really specialized focus that may or may not be suitable to include in this analysis in the future. So that's something we're going to explore with all of the contributing agencies. I think that's what we have for workforce pathways. We have a few other slides here that detail some of the other work, but I just wanted to provide a really high level overview of this year's Disconnected and At-Risk Youth Report. So I don't know if we want to take slides down. I can just talk through those. It won't be too long, Scott. So the Disconnected and At-Risk Youth Report originated out of the passage of a public act going back 2 years now. The report itself comes from work that came from outside of state service, originated by partners of the Dalio Foundation in partnership with the Boston Consulting Group. And there was an original report around disconnected and at-risk youth. The statute codified the generation of an annual report. The first annual report was published earlier in 2025, and we just published the second one in early 2026. So in early 2025, we demonstrated that the original count was 119,000 students were considered disconnected or at risk. That number was reduced a little bit. The number of disconnected and at-risk youth is based on both census data as well as State Department of Education data. In this year's report, the current count using the most recent data is 108,140 are considered disconnected and at risk. And that's really important because 62,000 odd young people are considered disconnected based on census measures, and 45,000 are considered at risk based on the definitions in the Public Act. We don't want to say 108,000 are disconnected. That big number is broken down into two smaller numbers. In the report, we do offer a view into some of the trends. The trend around the at-risk number of students is continuing to improve based on the efforts of the State Department of Education. And this year in the report, the State Department of Education served as really, really strong partners in providing a really detailed view into how they measure the at-risk status and all of the efforts underway to improve engagement with public school. And so future iterations of that report, we are hoping, look at to move either away from the census definition we have of disconnected or engage our partners on looking at folks who are more recently disconnected, so integrating data across agencies and looking at folks 1 year after high school and some of their trajectories, as we did in last year's report, and we'll hope to just have an enhanced analysis in the future. We can throw the slides back up and talk through if folks have questions about the ongoing work. We have a high volume of work moving through the integrated data system right now, and that makes for a busy and exciting time for research and evaluation.
Yeah. Well, let me see if there's, Seth, if your question came back up, and then Peter, you have the slides, which I think we will skip through, but they'll be in the record for folks to see, and it's the pipeline of requests that's coming through. And so again, to reiterate Rachel's point, that we're seeing increased interest in being able to use some of the data that state agencies collect to answer critical policy questions. And two members of the board here, both Michelle from Data Collaborative, Adler from Dalio Foundation, have been great partners in trying to make sure that we're able to answer questions that are coming from both agencies and from external parties. But that list that's in the next few slides, I think the board members will have after we post these after the board meeting, but you're seeing sort of increased demand coming through. I wanted to see, Seth, did you?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So this may
board members, if there's
sorry.
anything you want to reflect on for the past two sort of presentations. Keep going. Sorry, Seth.
Yeah, thank you. These two presentations illustrate the complexity and the depth of data sharing and reporting and what we can and what we have accomplished as a state. And there are many positive benefits to this. And that's one thing that this board seeks to promote. And that's wonderful. But given recent news and events, I have a concern that we may also, as a state, be unintentionally opening a liability. And here's what I mean. Given the data breach, the DOJ data breach of everyone's Social Security information, given the federal government serving subpoenas on Georgia and other states to get very specific information about individuals and about actions and activities within the state. I'm a little concerned that by promoting the use and access to data that we enlightenedly do in Connecticut, that we're creating pools of information that while our policy seeks to aggregate information so that individuals aren't singled out, that we might expose ourselves to getting federal subpoenas where this individual data or data that we get on individuals, such as, for example, when we want to track the progress of undocumented residents and how they're working through education and whether they attend school and that sort of thing, could be very sensitive and could be used for purposes that do not align with Connecticut's goals. And I'm trying to be very careful, diplomatic, and nonpartisan in the way I'm raising this issue because it can swing both ways at any given time. The real issue is, as a board, we have the statutory authority and mission to help determine the distinction between private data and public data. And so we're part of the quest to help make sure that anything that's publicized is aggregated and not individually identifiable. But my question going forward, and I'm sorry to like kind of drop this bomb and then jump off the board, but does this board have a role, or should it have a role, in trying to help create a framework where the state's collection of individual data is protected or somehow assists the Attorney General's office, if necessary, John, or the governor, whoever the governor may be at any given time, that gives us the capacity to fight federal subpoenas or federal actions under our federalism system, to seek information that we find helpful to gather, but could be misused if subpoenaed by the federal government.
I'm going to see if there's other comments from the board members, but I would just say, Seth, again, you will be missed. I can't agree with you more that this is the issue that that we need to be focusing on. It's a nonpartisan issue, which I think is what you said, but I'll just reiterate it. And it is, again, the arc of this meeting, I think, is a helpful reminder, is really trying to strike the balance between privacy, the public's right to know, and the ability to use information to inform policy and practice. And those three different things are not in direct conflict, but it just takes some work to tie those together. And it's really helpful that the board is focused on it. I'll just say for this particular case we're talking about here, one of the reasons for presenting some of these things is so that we are transparent about how the state does this, that it's not hidden, that, when we're looking at, here's the infrastructure for this, that we're clear with folks about how that works. We have a federated system, so we don't pool data together in the way that I think would support some concern about the security risk and the other sort of risks that are there for that data. Michelle and I had a good conversation before the meeting about the great caution that the state has exposing data and providing that data outside of state agencies. There's really an additional set of hurdles that we put in place to make sure that we're protecting information and releasing it sort of only after through a lot of steps for review. So that those are some of the protections that are in place. But yeah, I can't agree more. This is a central question. I did want to, Rachel, I know you were going to speak, but I want to see if there's other folks from the board that did want to add anything on to Seth's point. Let's see. Newman is unmuted.
I just have
Well, Michelle's, I mean, I'm looking at the Zoom, not in the actual room. So
okay.
Michelle, go ahead.
And I don't know the answer to this, but the Public Act that you showed earlier addressed some issues of privacy. I wonder, are there other, and the AG would probably know this better, are there other public acts that exist? And so is it worth like looking at all of them together and then deciding like, should we raise legislation? Because I do agree that this is a critical issue that we need to address, and we need to address it soon because, you know, I fear, you know, the midterm elections and what's going to be. I mean, fortunately, Connecticut is small, so we tend to stay off the radar right now of the federal government, it appears, but I don't know that that will always be the case. So just, yeah, thoughts.
I mean, I'll give one thought and then queue up. I think John is ready to engage on this. This, again, we're looking forward. This is where just past the midpoint for this current state data plan, looking forward to the next one. I do think privacy is a critical topic to take on more intentionally. The act that passed last year is one piece, but we don't have statewide privacy policies for the public sector. There's the Connecticut Data Privacy Act that AG's office and John may wish to speak to. We put in place a privacy policy for DataLink CT as the first step, and sort of not the first step literally, but an early step in developing the secure data enclave. So, but I think looking more intentionally at privacy is an important topic that we should be focusing on in the next sort of 2-year cycle for this. I don't know, John, did you?
Yeah, a couple of things, and some of these are. This is where I put the disclaimer of this may not be the official policy of the Office of the Attorney General. You know, Seth's points are all spot on and well taken about the risk of creating a treasure trove of data for misuse by other persons for other reasons. The one thing I will mention too is anything that is discussed by this board regarding that, we also want to be very wary of the chilling effect. I mean, Rachel provided in her presentation all the wonderful purposes and uses of the data to deliver services to our citizens, which is the purpose of this. And the other little rant I'll go on too is to the extent that the veracity of that the data and the veracity of the information is called into question, I think it is manifestly our duty as public servants to make sure that we have information that is the source of truth and is reliable going forward. And then how people use that or misuse it, history will take care of that. That's just my little rant. And unfortunately, we are not off the radar of the federal government. There's matters other in my office, but just for the benefit of everyone, I'm on the affirmative side. I'm in privacy and data security. So the defensive side, you know, for example, voter records or other areas are handled by other units.
Yeah, Nick, and then I see Rachel, and then ironically, perhaps the next topic is open data and transparency, where again, I think, you know, we're really, I think as a board is trying to strike the balance between these different things, protecting individual privacy, being able to use data productively, understanding where we meet the public's right to know and the role that government has in transparency and accountability. And that's challenging, but hopefully we're threading the needle on it. Nick.
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch upon one of the last things about kind of when we're using this data, making sure that it's a source of truth. And I think probably the best way to get at that is to make sure that, you know, while we are interested in protecting privacy, that we also have standards that we can use to verify that that data is a source of truth. And I think one of the best ways to do that is making sure that's publicly available and auditable. And so, you know, interested parties can get access to that information. You know, I think kind of there were a few other things that were said that, you know, I didn't necessarily jump in on, but not for lack of interest in it, but I really just am kind of taking it all in and wanting to make sure that I can go back and talk to whoever I need to talk to, you know, and form a more articulated response. But I don't want that to fall by the wayside. That I think probably one of the best ways to make sure that we are having our data as a source of truth is to make sure that, you know, it's visible and people can see it. Otherwise, you know, I think it becomes a lot harder to say it's a source of truth. But just, you know, like I said, didn't want my prior silence to be interpreted one way or the other. But Yeah, that's all I had to say on that for now.
Hey, I just want to real quick before Rachel responds. I want to clarify because I want to make sure that I'm understood. I absolutely am 100% behind the mission of gathering this data. I think it's so important, and I think it puts us head and shoulders above other states in our ability to move social agendas forward, to be able to improve lives of our citizens, all of that. I'm a big believer in all of this. My concern is that we are inadvertently maybe creating, like John said, a treasure trove that the federal government might seek to pierce for reasons that don't comport with Connecticut's philosophies for trying to advance our citizens and residents who are not necessarily citizens, but who live among us. And so I'm not looking to take our mission backwards. I'm looking to continue to make data available, but maybe think about creating a framework that would allow our state to be able to fight federal subpoenas if we deem them to be inappropriate. That's all.
And I think, and Rachel, 1 second. I think, again, the next 3 topics will also sort of touch on these. We'll talk about open data and transparency, address guidance where we introduce concepts of privacy to make sure that we're balancing like the ability to get quality location information and privacy. And then we'll talk about some of the terminology later, including some of the terms that are used for FOI to make sure, again, that we can provide, I think, in the future clarity on that. But yeah, I think Seth, to your point, there's no disagreement on that. We're really trying to sort of thread this needle that it's not we're able to use the data, but not creating sort of a treasure trove at the same time. Rachel.
I wanted to thank everyone for their comments, and I'm so sorry that I'm not in the room today with my colleagues because I want to reiterate around privacy, security, and improving people's lives through using the information that we collect as a state. We work on what you're seeing today is the product of many, many months of work, in some cases years of work. It takes a lot of time. Data that we all knew moves at the speed of trust. And so it takes time to build relationships, even with our state service colleagues who've agreed to share data as part of Data Link CT. Katie and I work pretty tirelessly to both establish trust, make sure legal agreements are in place. Part of the reason for the secure enclave is to make sure that we're moving data in a secure location. This is done on demand, which makes it very difficult and slow sometimes too slow for folks to produce things that could be actionable. We're working hard on all fronts to make this more efficient and useful for folks. And so we're excited to present these kinds of things. As simplistic as they look, I assure you they are extraordinarily complex behind the scenes. And Scott can't say enough that there is no place where all of these things live in perpetuity. They are done artisanally, one by one. But the fact that we've been able to produce as much as we have in the last year and a half means that the volume has increased. And so we're trying to find ways to be more efficient so that we can produce more foundational knowledge that can be used in the policymaking process. And so perhaps in the future, it might be good to talk a little bit about some of our Data Link CT innovations for the board so that you can see a little bit more about how the process works because you're seeing pieces of it now. But from end to end, it's pretty laborious. And I just wanted to say that I wanted to really sing the praises of our state service colleagues who are themselves also in their own ways working to protect people's privacy and security.
Thank you. We're the ones talking, but the other agencies are the ones doing a lot of the work. Peter, can you pull up the slide, keep going through the slides till we get to the open data one? I don't see any of their hands at this moment. And thank you, Rachel and Katie. Going through, keep going, keep going, keep going. Board members will receive this information later. Great, open data. Again, in the balance striking theme for the day, we are trying to strike the balance between all these different sort of competing factors with how the state uses data. Quickly, I'll go through. We host every year an Open Data Day to reiterate Rachel's point, state agency staff to sort of highlight their work, talk about the ways in which agencies are working on open data. So we had over 120 people from state agencies attended it, covered privacy and security as our first 2 topics, how to automate and make things more efficient. There, the challenges and the opportunities that we're facing with AI and the ability to use that for open data. And so that was a success. It's a nice way, again, it's a meeting just for sort of the state agencies that put some time into this and hopefully to highlight and reflect their work, and they can learn from each other. Next topic is Open Data Access Plan. So this is one of the things that we talked about last year. It's a statutory requirement for all agencies to develop an open data access plan so that they are not that there's a process through which they're not just being asked to sort of like dump their data on a website, that they are thinking thoughtfully and carefully through it to make sure that it meets agency priorities and that it meets the public's interest and that we're protecting privacy and security through that process. I think this is the timeline we had talked about last year, and I will just say we are a little bit behind just due to staff turnover. So we are hoping, and today we will begin interviewing candidates to sort of fill an open data role that's open currently. But our hope is to get these plans finalized this spring. Last year, we met with all of the executive branch agencies to discuss the ways in which they work with open data, how they use open data. And so the board members, you have a summary of those discussions in the materials. We don't have a slide of it just because it's better written as like a one-page long document, but folks received that, and I wanted to see if there's any questions or thoughts on that. What we're hoping, I think by the time of the next meeting, is we'll have gone through and gotten each agency to put together a plan for this. So there was sort of two parts of this. We're meeting with the agencies, understanding the challenges, the issues that they see, kind of working with open data, trying to understand those. And you have the summary of those and what they'd kind of like to see going forward. And then each agency is going to lay out their agency-specific plan that we'll put in a consolidated document that is on the next slide. Great. This is a template for the plan, and our hope is if we can sort of get the staffing in place and pull things together to get this back to the board by the next meeting. If not, then it'll be the meeting after that. But sometime later this year, you'll get the plan from all of the executive branch agencies on their priorities for open data. But you have today, before you sort of the condensed summary of the discussions with all of those agencies, anonymized and scrubbed of their identifying information, consistent with our past discussion, but to get a sense of the topics and the themes that they prioritize. So it's in the board materials. We don't have a slide for it, but I just want to see if there's comments or suggestions from anybody on that or reactions to it. Again, I know particularly Seth, not to continually cite you, has wanted to make sure that we can get agencies to identify what they're doing, what their priorities on this front is. And so this is an effort to have a more intentional planning process behind it. And if there's no comments, we can swiftly move to our next topic, which is great. Next slide. This is a nice GIF or GIF, whatever, of the plans. You can keep going, Peter. It's mesmerizing. I'm going to skip the data request process, although just to spend 2 seconds on this, Seth, I think to the points and that many other people have made too. I don't want to single you out, but it's our last chance. That there's a requirement that agencies, have procedures in place to manage requests for their data. That's something that it must be consistent with FOI. It must be consistent with the new guidance that'll come out. And so I think we'll take a closer look at this as well later this year. Keep going, next slide. This is an example, keep going. So great. So one of the things that it's on the agenda under AI, we're trying to slip this in, is talking about where we're working with agencies to improve data quality, which is important for the use of data in things like AI. And so Ashley Benitez from our GIS office is going to talk about address guidance that's being developed with agencies now to improve data quality, and we'd welcome feedback from board members on that.
Good morning, Data Board, and members of the public who may be watching. Next slide, please. Yeah, so my name is Ashley Benitez. I'm a GIS coordinator in the GIS office with Alfredo and within DAPA. So we wanted to bring to your attention this draft document that we have been working on. Being in the GIS office, we get to support a lot of agencies on their work related to spatial analysis, and DAPA also just supports overall other agencies in the analysis. One of the things that in the work that we do, we work on releasing guidance as well within the GIS office based on our workflows and what we see in the data that we work on. So one of the topics that we wanted to focus on was addresses. So the conversation here has sort of highlighted a lot on the importance of addresses, I think, as obviously personal information, but I wanted to bring it to your attention as well in terms of the usability address to track progress on like Rachel presented as well, and other applications. Oh, sorry, face. So next slide. In the guidance, we'd like to define two differences between what is a location address and a mailing address. Yeah, I'm a little cannot see it from there. Mailing addresses, we do the distinction based on their usability and their applicability. For example, location addresses are those that can be geocoded, and there's a definition there, those that can be translated into its coordinates. And then there's also the mailing addresses. And we like to define those two differences for the utility and in the application. The next slide. Yeah. Like I mentioned before, in the addresses that we get to see and are collected across state programs, we have found that they often lack consistency. And these many records, when we get to work with them, cannot be geocoded, or if not necessarily in a spatial application, cannot be aggregated to a best unit like a town, zip code, or other. Mailing and physical addresses usually are mixed in the same field, which makes it also difficult to tell if there's an address that actually belongs to a physical address like I demonstrated before in the orange, or a mailing address. And these variations in formatting reduce that reliability for mapping. So we understood that there was a lack of standards or guidance, and we wanted to release this to make it easier to match addresses across agencies. The document, like I showed at the beginning, the document, next slide, please. The document does include some recommendations. I like to see this document, and we released this draft early enough as a scaffold for everybody to provide comments, understanding that there might be other cases and other recommendations that could be provided by experts that have been looking at this problem longer. So in these recommendations, we suggest to provide clear instructions and examples on complete addresses. This is for in the cases of data submission and data collection by state agencies. Include drop-downs whenever possible for fields like town and municipality. We see that there's a lot of errors in data entry in those cases. And with existing data sets, we recommend to start evaluating them and start identifying those complete or incorrect addresses and flag for revision. Like we were mentioning before, review privacy laws and any agency policies and procedures before sharing any data. Consult with DAPA as well, and if you require or need any support for address validation tools or geocoding services, to coordinate with the state GIS office. Next slide. I think that's it, yeah. So let's go back to the prior slide and the recommendations. Prior slide, yeah. Back, yeah. Yep. And yeah, I think that's all for that. I think Alfredo wanted to add maybe one or two more things.
Yeah, so a couple of things in this, and just to kind of overlay, like we are keenly aware that privacy and addresses are critically kind of interlinked and intermixed, and can create kind of some challenges. One of the things I do want to kind of highlight that from a geospatial and kind of GIS and geographic perspective, an address is not necessarily a matter. It like implies that that it has like privacy to it, because like you can expect like the fire department or the postal service or Amazon to kind of arrive at like 10 Main Street or whatever. So what happens at those addresses is, so I think one of the things that I would kind of encourage people to remember is the fact that, there is a slight differentiation between acknowledging the existence of an address versus, kind of like the things that go on in those places. Yeah.
So I just asked Peter to put the slide up again on with the address guidance and the link. You will have it on the agenda as well, but it would be good to have some feedback from this group, and please share widely. Your feedback can be submitted until March 27. I apologize if I was really brief and quick over the discussion of this topic, and I know we're almost at the tail end of our meeting. But please feel free to reach out directly to me. We can have a deeper conversation on addresses and other work. Again, this is only for state agencies as of now, as a test to our work with addresses. And because we get to support all these agencies, like I mentioned before, it's good to start releasing this. So also share with also your colleagues that may work with address data more often. And yeah, please reach out to me. And I think that's all.
All right. I'm going to skip the one more slide on this, but it is of interest and we can return to it in the future. One of the other things that is related to the address guidance is trying to make sure that we're tracking the many different villages, hamlets, boroughs, et cetera, in the state, which is the slide with the map on it. And in a future meeting, we can go through that. Great. Now, I thought I put this at the end because I thought there would be a
Scott,
lot.
I'm sorry, Scott,
Oh,
just
yeah,
real
Seth.
quick, and I'm sorry to keep jumping in here,
No,
but I just wanted to mention one thing in relation to the GIS presentation. One thing that complicates the job for the folks who just spoke is, like, for example, when I was at the Secretary of the State's office, I was responsible for the Safe at Home program. And that was where folks who were victims of domestic violence would have an alternate, like, PO box delivery address, so that their physical address would never be public knowledge. And if they were a member of that program, then they would go through the Secretary of the State's office to basically be able to state on any state application, or when they're filling out the fields on a state form, that, they could basically state that they're in the Safe at Home program and just provide their PO box, or their alternate address. And so that's one example. Maybe witness protection might be another example. And I know there are statutes that protect the home addresses of, like, police officers and prosecutors. So those types of things can also confound trying to match up a location address for a person with their mailing address. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm sure the GIS folks know that already, but I just wanted to make sure, just in, I wanted to put it out there just in case.
Yes, thank you, Seth. We are very keenly aware of statute 8-217B that covers that, and inclusive of the Safe at Home program. We've had many discussions on this, especially as it relates to parcels and parcel ownership and making that data available. We are in constant communications with the assessors and the regional councils of government, and and members of staffers from the judicial branches of both the state and national level, when they reach out to us asking for kind of suppression of judges and other kind of qualified individuals. So we are keenly aware of that, but I think part of what we are trying to achieve with the document is trying to kind of differentiate between the existence of a location and the activities that go on in that location, whether they be ownership or other things. We like, our job in the GIS office is really to acknowledge the existence of every possible address in Connecticut.
let's continue. And again, I'll reiterate two things for what Alfredo said. These are good examples of, again, trying to just strike the balance between the many different things here. We had the discussions with the Safe at Home folks a couple of times about this. I know the Secretary of State's rep is not on today's meeting, but we can follow up with her about that for the future. Seth, as you know, judges are one of the positions they can have their information not disclosed at the municipal level. And so in a few months, you'll be available to avail yourself of this opportunity. Next topic, terminology. I thought, again, we put this at the end because I thought we wanted to leave a lot of time for discussion, and I failed in that endeavor, but maybe we'll take 2 minutes to introduce this, and then we can begin with it at the next meeting, the fuller discussion, and I'll go through again, in sort of trying to like thread the needle between different topics. There's a lot of terms that get used in different ways by different folks. So the folks that we talked about in agencies that work with data are requirements for public data. So we have a definition. This is the one on the screen now for data that's in statute related to the state data plan and the chief data officer and those requirements. We go to the next one. There's a definition for public data that's in the same section. We click to the next one. Definitions for public records, which govern both the determination of what's available through Freedom of Information Act, and also the record retention requirements for the state library, I believe. Although again, the experts on the call kind of correct me on this. And then there's a handful of other terms on the next slide. Great, that come up that also can be used in sort of different ways. Personally identifying information is an address, PII, or not. It's covered sort of different ways in Connecticut statutes. Confidential information, personal data, the term that's used in the Data Privacy Act, I believe, and personal information is a term that's used in the privacy guidance. I might have switched those, but one way or the other, we're using different terms in different places, all of which I think speaks to the importance to try and get clarity on some of the terminology and make sure that folks understand the context in which some of these terms are being used by kind of different stakeholders. Each has a sort of legitimate basis in Connecticut state law and regulations. And so we hope to have as a discussion about this. We're going to run out of time for the actual meeting today, but maybe we can sort of kick off a future discussion about this and try and identify ways in which we can make this sort of actionable and feed into the next state data plan and the development of policies here. But I'll leave open for any brief kind of comments on that or other things before we wrap up today's meeting. And thank you to those of you that put some thought into the terminology discussion that is now getting shunted to the next meeting. I don't see any raised hands or unmuted microphones, so we will adjourn today's meeting of the Connecticut Data Analysis Technology Advisory Board. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance, and particularly thank you, Nick, for agreeing to serve in this role in the future. And thank you, Seth, for your many years of service and continued engagement. As I think we said several times, you will be missed, and hopefully all of our paths will cross again with you in the future.
Thank you.
That's it.